What's up? What's up? Welcome back to the Obvious Choice podcast. I am here just with Amber today, who ends at Disneyland. And Amber, we're going to be talking about doing nothing today.
Oh, that is not my specialty.
It is not mine either. And that's why I think that I'm so passionate about this, because in coaching and in business, doing nothing is often better than doing something, but it's really hard to do. Mm-hmm. And more than anything else, when you're coaching, particularly if you're coaching somebody else, other people expect you to do something. So even though they hire you to get some sort of a result, and the best way to get that result is often to do nothing, they still expect you to do something. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to talk about this today. It's going to be a coaching heavy podcast, I think.
Oh, well, that'll be fun. But I have a question first.
Yeah. What's up?
Can you tell me about the card behind you? It looks like you have a baseball card, and I'm a huge baseball card family, and I need to know more.
Right. So this, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it.
His props are great.
On YouTube. This is Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck #1, his rookie card. And the story behind this card is that when I was younger, I collected baseball cards all the time. I still love baseball. Obviously, I'm wearing a Blue Jays hat right now, but Ken Griffey Jr. was just like was my guy, right? Mm-hmm. So I collected his baseball cards. I go to card shops and stuff like that. And I had all of his rookie cards except for his premier rookie card, which is this one, which is Upper Deck #1. And I thought, I was like, one day I'm going to make enough money that I'll be able to afford Upper Deck #1 Ken Griffey Jr. It was like $80.
Hit it big. It's all downhill after that.
And the funniest thing is, so of course, when I made my first $80, I did not run out and buy Upper Deck #1 Ken Griffey Jr. I actually never bought this card. This card was a gift from Sam Pogue, who you know. And we bonded over Ken Griffey Jr. And there's actually two lessons with the story that I didn't even think about when you asked me the question, which the only reason you asked me the question is because we were talking beforehand. You asked me the question. I said, this will be good on the podcast. So pretend like you're asking me this question again. And then
you said you're going
to test your acting chops.
Which are not. This is the extent. This is all that.
So if Amber's question sounded somewhat contrived.
That's because it was. But it was a genuine question originally. I'm just not good at reenactments.
It was a genuine question originally. So there's actually two lessons with this code that are really, really cool. One is networking, the lesson in networking. So if you're introverted like me, I've had to teach myself how to do things like small talk. And the goal of small talk is to establish something you have in common with the person. And that's my only goal when I meet somebody new, is just I'll ask them a series of questions. Where are you from? Do you like any sports, good movies, books, whatever it is, only so I can figure out whether I have one thing in common with that person. And then I just talk about that one thing. Maybe you're a better communicator than I am. I don't know how to have small talk conversations any other way. The biggest mistake that people make is they find something in common and then they try to go on to another topic. And so when I first met somebody named Sam Pogue, who at that point was the head of business development for Onnit, which I don't know if anybody knows what Onnit is, but anyway, he worked for Onnit. And I first met him and I found out that he was from Seattle. And I started talking about Ken Griffey Jr. and how I love Ken Griffey Jr. And I told him the story that he told me. And that's what we bonded on. And that's how we became friends. Like many years later, we're still good friends. And we still send each other videos of Ken Griffey Jr. Like, I don't know, stuff will just pop up on my Instagram or whatever all the time because I just like watching him hit dingers. And so every time I see him hit a dinger, I watch the video. So it sends me more videos of him hitting dingers. That's and I'll send it to Sam. And then one day, of course, Sam sent this in the mail to me. So that's lesson #1 is networking, is find a commonality with somebody. And those intro questions are really useful. The second lesson is kind of a lesson in goals and how goal lines start moving, and how we talked about this a couple episodes ago, I think, right, Amber? Where if you have a goal, the minute that you meet it, you'll forget often that it was even the goal in the first place because you're already set another goal. Like my goal in life when I was younger was to make $80 so that I could buy Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck #1, his rookie card. And then, of course, when I made $80, I never bought it. it just wasn't that important. All of a sudden, now I had different stuff that I was worrying about.
So question,
And,
what's the goal now? What's the benchmark now?
well, there isn't a benchmark now.
No?
The benchmark now is to never lose sight of what I really want to be doing day to day, which is just creating and building stuff.
No.
My biggest worry is that something will happen that takes me out of the game where I'm not able to build new things, which either means that I'll say yes to too many things and get too busy and not have the time or attention or energy, or I'll just make really bad mistakes and blow a whole bunch of money and not be able to build stuff. And so, I told you about something we're going to do in a few months just before. I won't share it now because we don't have a date or anything yet, but just to be able to do stuff like that, just because they sound like a good idea.
Yeah.
And also with this book, that's probably going to come out in like a year and a half, the Obvious Choice book, that a lot of this material is based off of. It's about building an audience for that book, which is like, you have to, the key to marketing is to dig the well so far before you're thirsty that it almost feels silly. What a lot of people do when they make a mistake is they say, "Hey, John," like they'll call me or they'll message me and they'll say, "Hey, John, what's up, man? I got a book coming out, or I got this product coming out, and I need to market it. What can I do to get customers for it?" I'm like, "Cool, when's it coming out?" They're like, "Oh, 2 weeks." I was like, "Bitch, you should have started 6 months ago."
Yo.
Like, are there things you can do in 2 weeks to get some attention? Maybe. But, oh my God, you have to dig the well before you're thirsty. Is the key to this. If you are not actively marketing something 4 to 6 months before it comes out, I think you're too late. Once this book comes out, whenever it comes out, y'all are going to be so annoyed hearing me talk about it, because I will have been talking about it for 2 years. And at that point, you're probably going to buy the book in the hopes that I'm just going to shut up about it. And I thank you for your $20. I'm going to earn about 2 of that. So,
but at least you don't have to worry about the marketing quite as much.
And maybe I'll have enough for a sushi dinner.
There you go.
Amber, how you doing?
I'm good. I actually talked to you, not to you, but I talked about you to my doctor today. He's writing a book.
Psychologist, oh good.
Yeah, definitely have one of those on staff. But he was writing a book, and so I was telling him that you were writing one too. So he's going to be buying Ignite the Fire, long story short, because he said he looked you up on his tablet, and he's like, okay, which book should I get? I'm like, well, this is the cornerstone for him. So there you go.
Why is he interested in my book? Is it just like the process? Is he self-publishing it? Like,
I don't think he'll self-publish. I told him that's what you've done up until what you're doing now, but I think he's more interested in letting someone else do the publishing for him. He just wants to write,
Sure.
So
he has ideas
I think
that he feels are worthwhile and wants to get them out. It's probably not a financially motivated thing.
No, he would give it away for free. He just wants to help people. But I think you guys are kind of kindred spirits in a lot of ways. So we were talking about all that kind of stuff. So.
Oh, cool. Well, that's exciting. Thanks for selling
the $20
for me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get like 8. I get like
okay.
8, depending on where he buys it from, I get like 8 to 10 for Ignite the Fire. So
you're
putting my kid through college.
I try.
Let's talk about doing nothing.
Oh man.
I want to start this section. I want to start this conversation with somebody named Ronald Read. His last name's pronounced Reed, Read. And I'll read you his Wikipedia entry.
Oh boy.
Because his Wikipedia page is one of my favorites.
I was confused at first because you said Ronald and you keep calling Ren Ronald sometimes. I was like
Rencel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ronald Reed's Wikipedia page reads like this. He is an American philanthropist. Philanthropist?
Philanthropist. That's how I would pronounce it.
He's an American philanthropist Shit, I gotta stop reading words and talk to more humans. He's an investor.
There you go.
He's a janitor. And he's a gas station attendant.
Love it.
So nobody knew who this guy was until he died. He died in 2014. He was 92 years old. Nobody knew who he was until he died, because when he died, what happened was they realized he had $8 million in the bank. And he was a gas station attendant and janitor his entire life. He didn't win the lottery. What he actually did was much, much simpler. He lived well below his means, he saved what he could, and he invested his money into blue chip stocks and waited. Basically, he just did nothing. And his money compounded. So over time, meager savings compounded, so much so that when he died in 2014, Ronald Read's net worth was higher than 99.99% of people who died.
That's crazy.
In 2014. In a lot of cases, doing nothing's better than doing something, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If something is working, change can often make it worse. It's a lot easier to screw up something that's working than it is to genuinely improve it. What did Peter Drucker once say? It's in here somewhere. There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all.
Like tongue in cheek.
The problem, though, is that clients expect you to do stuff. Even really smart, very handsome, somewhat short clients who write books about coaching and host podcasts about coaching that include sections about the value of doing nothing expect their coaches to do stuff. So I can tell you that story in a second. But first, I want to talk about this issue of, Amber, why in the world do we always feel like we need to be touching something? Like there's all of these lines that I repeat to myself all of the time because I just need to remind myself of them all of the time, which is like, an engineer takes pride in creating a system that doesn't need to be touched. Mm-hmm. Like, I love, as stupid as this sounds, I love loading the dishwasher and setting like the 4-hour timer thing, knowing that I'm going to wake up and the thing's going to have a run overnight.
I do that with my washer.
It's the best feeling, but like, is it not an unjustifiably good feeling?
Yes.
To set this thing and know that it's working for you.
Yep.
So why then, because you and I are very similar in this way,
mm-hmm.
Maybe anybody listening is the same way, why then are we so obsessed with just touching things all of the time when they're already working? Like, what's going on?
There's a lot of reasons. The big one that comes to mind for me personally is insecurity. Like, I'm never doing enough. I'm never doing good enough. Like, I'm always behind the ball and I need to stay ahead of it and constantly be doing something to make up for the shortcomings that I have. So for me, that's one of the big reasons.
Is that a comparison thing?
I don't think it's a comparison. I'm pretty careful about curating the things that I see. That's just kind of me naturally. Like I always feel like I'm in trouble. Like I always feel like I'm wrong. Like that's just kind of always who I've been. So for me, I think I've told you before, like, you can call me ugly, you can call me all sorts of names, but tell me I'm not smart. And that's like the worst thing you could ever tell me. And so I'm always kind of on this, like, I need to prove myself. I need to prove that I'm smart because for whatever reason, I'm, that's my natural reaction.
But you said something there, right? You said it always feels like I'm behind, something that maybe I added. I wrote it down as you were talking, but I might have just added it as opposed to you saying it, which is never feels like I'm moving fast enough.
Let me think if that's true.
Is that true for you? That's true for me.
Not necessarily fast enough, but like, or maybe I would mean it in a different way, like fast enough in that before I lose an opportunity to do something. Because like I always joke, like my memory's terrible. Like I need to do this right now before I forget.
Right.
So I would mean it in that context.
Okay. Yeah. So then it's just It's almost like a worry. Yeah, I get that. I'll be writing something. I'll have an idea for like something completely unrelated. Oh, this would be good to talk to Allison about later, or to do with our
Mm,
friends or whatever, and I'll write that down. For me, I never feel like I'm moving fast enough.
mm,
I never feel like I'm getting enough done. And I think, I don't really know, because it's funny. There's a lot of things that people just don't talk about. Like, I'm willing to talk really openly about with friends of mine, but they're not willing to talk openly
mhm.
about, which is just like, what are you actually doing, and what are you actually accomplishing, and how well is it working?
Yep.
Few people are actually willing to talk about that. And like, I kind of think that I'm accomplishing a lot. Like, I'm getting like 100 plus pieces of content out a week. They're getting better. And what I keep working on, though, is continually I'm pulled to build a machine and just, okay, here's my machine of lead generation, of communication, of nurturing people. I mean, all of these like marketer language, but basically just like build a relationship with as many people in as genuine a way as possible.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to do that through content on the front end, short form content on the front end that has some sort of meaningful second step for people who want to take it in a very low pressure way. Like, hey, if you want to go deeper on this, I got this thing for you. And creating more of those. So what I've actually created now is, I mean, it's funny, I'm going back to like old school, like PTDC marketing days, but we have 5, I mean, they're called content upgrades, but basically just like 5 continuations of content and on different topics. So one is on programming, one's on opening a gym or running a gym. One is on basically high-end online training, one's on lower-end online training, and one is a mini course.
Mm.
And the mini course I actually don't use as much, and the only reason is mini course actually is a freebie to get emails. It's almost too big of a commitment. You'd almost be better off like charging for a low-end course if you're going to do something like that.
Yeah.
But the ebooks and stuff like that work well. But anyway, so I'll put out a piece of content and then I'll say, hey, if you want to learn more about this, here's how you can go deeper. And then that gives me permission to get their email or follow up with them, or I'll recommend a podcast episode. But these things I'm building out into a system where Alina and her husband, where, a VA husband-wife team can help promote, where it's on the back of, you'll start seeing it on my Instagram. I put the first one up actually today. You'll start seeing it basically as the last slide on my Instagram. If it makes sense as a continuation of the content, I'll just put a slide up that basically just says, hey, you want to go deeper on this? Here's this thing for you. And over time, as people are finding it, they'll go deeper and it'll start to build the email list quicker. But it still doesn't feel like I'm going fast enough. It still feels like I need to be doing all of the things and touching the thing all of the time, whereas the entire purpose of it is to allow me to work on things like a book or work out more or whatever it is. So anyway, if that's you, I vibe with it. I can tell you about why I almost fired my online trainer, though. Can I do that?
Yeah, I kind of need that story.
So, we can call him Jack. This is different. This is a different trainer than I've talked about in some of the other episodes. I've hired a bunch of trainers. I believe very strongly in hiring your own coaches, so I always hire a lot of coaches. But anyway, so I knew Jack for a lot of years. I hired him. We talked about my goals. He spoke to my chiropractor, and he wrote me a good plan. Like, it was a good plan. He did everything that he should have. Him and my chiropractor got along well. The plan was very, very good. This is when I was still seeing a chiro. And then I executed on the plan. And it didn't take long. Like, I started to see, in the mirror results pretty quick. I was already at a relatively high level of training. But as the weeks passed, I got frustrated because he didn't change my program. Like, he just never changed it. And I assumed that he was being lazy. And I decided to fire him as my coach after about 8 weeks. And so I organized a call with him. And what he said just stopped me in my tracks. He said, bro, you're doing great. I'm looking at your weekly check-ins. You're making good progress week after week. I haven't changed your program because it's working so well. Right. He's right.
Mm-hmm.
just because some arbitrary measure of time's passed, it doesn't necessitate a new program. I was progressing. Changing the program would have been ill-advised. What Jack actually did was the right thing in not changing the program. A lot of trainers who were less experienced than him would have changed the program. He actually proved his expertise by not changing it because it was working. In fitness, as with most things, right, if something's working, you don't need to change it up. Doesn't mean you can't, but you certainly don't need to. His mistake, though, was that he didn't tell me what he wasn't doing. And so there's a parable of a master locksmith. You might have heard this one. Mm. But after this conversation with Jack, well, I didn't fire him. I ended up working with him for a while longer, and then moved on because I wanted to hire somebody in the part of the world that I was in person. But I was reminded of this parable about this master locksmith. So we go to a house and it had a jam lock. Like he called in to fix this lock. And in about 30 seconds, this guy could just pop the lock off, right? Like he was a master. He'd been doing this thing for decades. And his customers were happy with it until they saw the bill. And they'd say, $250 for what? Took you less than a minute to do this. And on one hand, the customer was right. It took the locksmith less than a minute to do it. On the other hand, what the customer doesn't see is that the locksmith trained for decades to be able to pop the lock off in about 30 seconds. So as the story goes, here's what the locksmith does now. This locksmith now pretends to struggle with the lock for 29 minutes and 30 seconds. He'll be like, oh, he'll like take off his like jacket because he'll be like sweating because he'll be pretending to do it. And then about 29 minutes, he'll just pop the thing off in 30 seconds.
That's so sad. Look up on YouTube.
And he found that it's easier to charge what he's worth this way.
Mm-hmm.
An expert technician, they'd know not to change the program. Right, that was Jack. An expert coach, though, on the other hand, they would have known that I wouldn't have been able to read his mind. Jack was an expert technician. He was not an expert coach. Now imagine if Jack would have said to me, before we even started or when he gave me the program, he would have said to me something like, yo, I don't believe in 4-week programs. Body doesn't know how much time has passed. It's irrelevant. It responds to stimulus. So what I do is I monitor your progress. If you're improving, if everything's going well, I'm not going to change your program. That said, if you're ever feeling bored, worn out, whatever, just let me know. I can adjust it right away. How's that sound?
No.
And then as the training was going, almost revisit that from time to time and just say like, hey man, look, I haven't changed your program for a while. I'm checking everything you're sending in. You're doing amazing. Like your results are ridiculous. You feeling good? You still looking forward to training? And maybe I would have said yes. Maybe I would have said no. I don't remember being bored with the training. I remember just being like, this guy isn't earning his money, which is the silliest thing ever because I know all of the reasons why I hired him and none of them had anything to do with how often he changes from a bench press to a machine incline plate loaded press. Who the hell cares about changing it if your body's adapting? What's the end goal? And so no matter what you coach, whatever it is, the best course of action is often to make a plan and to follow that plan for a long time. And then take in feedback, and if it needs to be changed, sure, change it, but often it won't. It's not to change a plan, though, prematurely just because an arbitrary measure of time has passed. Instead, it's to base it on progress. But all of this having been said, you can never assume that your client knows what you're doing or why you're not doing something.
Mm-hmm. If you don't set expectations, your client will, and then you're both screwed because you don't know what their expectations are. And you haven't communicated yours. So that's one of the first rules is to, hey, here's how this is going to work. So we have to set expectations to get ahead of those feelings.
So when do you do that? So I like that line a lot. If you don't set expectations, your clients will.
Mm-hmm.
So when do you do that? At what stage? Because if you haven't listened to it yet, I highly recommend when you're done this one, listen to the episode on onboarding. It was episode 45, building a killer onboarding process to set your clients up for success. We did have some technical difficulties. The audio is not great on that episode, but the content is really, really stellar. So have a listen to that one afterwards. Just turn your volume all the way up on it. But when in that process, Amber, would you add this in?
I actually think there's two spots. So I think once they've committed to working with you, but I think you reiterate it the first time that they get their program, because people.
So when you actually send their program, so
yes.
Whether you send them by email, whether it's you hand them, whether it's you hand it to them, whether it's your first training session with them in the gym, would you do it right at the beginning?
I would do it. Yeah. I would like, look, here's how I normally operate. Right. And based on what your goals are and what we're trying to do together, this is what that's going to look like. However, because, you're human and you may feel X, Y, and Z, let me know and I can adjust it to suit you. But this is how, we make progress, is by keeping, the things that are working and continuing to do those things. But if for some reason something isn't working for you anymore, either, because you're bored or what have you, let me know. But until then, or until you stop making progress, this is what we're going to do. Does that work? And, get their commitment.
Tell them a story like that locksmith story. Do you think that makes sense?
I think stories are always good. I just think we have to be a little bit careful about, it depends on the client, right? Like, are they going to get it? I'm a fan of using stories to communicate something, but I know with like some of the people that I worked with, they'd be like, huh? They wouldn't be able to draw the conclusion. So it depends on your client. So know your audience.
Time thing.
That too.
Like, how
yes.
time do you want to take at the beginning of a session when somebody's all gung ho? Because it's the first time you're like, okay, I know you're really excited to get sweating. I know this has been something you've thought about for a long time, and we're finally taking that step. But first, let me tell you about a parable.
You know what? Just drop into a wall sit and let's have a chat while you're there.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so right at the beginning, you'd say that to them. And I think, from what I've heard, this is a very common issue amongst good trainers, where their clients feel like it needs to be more exciting. Their clients feel like it needs to be fancier. And I don't think that there's necessarily something wrong with like fancy exercises or new movements that you put in. I do, though, think that you have to be very careful as a coach to not let fancy kind of take away from the integrity of the program. And so there's a number of ways to do this. One is, I always liked, and I always thought that, I'm surprised more people don't talk about this more. Maybe it's because every time that I've spoken about it, the content's fallen flat. And so, if something doesn't have good engagement online right now, it just nobody talks about it. It doesn't mean it's not important. God, it's so annoying. Like, what you have to understand is that good content is because something makes a better story. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily more important. In fact, the most important things are often boring, reliable, repeatable. But because they don't make good stories, they don't make good content. And so good content is very different from living a good life. And they're just totally different things. But all of this coming full circle, what brought it up? I always thought changing the grip and the stance was a really, really good way. Like if you can understand different stances and different grips and different implements in training, your client will never get bored. And you'll also always be able to change it up also for different like skills and goals and stuff like that. Even something as simple as like all the different grips on a lat pull down. Right? Are you going to go supinated, pronated? Are you going to go medium grip? Are you going to go neutral grip? You can do it a whole bunch of different ways. You can even do an offset grip. Like you can do a whole bunch of different things. Throw fat grips on there, see what happens. I used to make fitness equipment. Sometimes it was super fun. We take, I did it with tennis ball and I did it with softball, where we drill through the middle of the thing, and then we'd put a clip on the other side of it, and we'd clip that onto a machine, and you'd grip the tennis ball. And you'd use that
there you go.
We used to do stuff like that all the time. And the same thing with stances. If you're going to do the most conventional stance for most exercises is going to be a medium width stance where your knees a little bit bent, in line with your toes, blah, 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 right? Well balanced, whatever. Well, you can go offset. Well, what if you bring your feet closer together? You're going to be less balanced. What if you go wider? Well, you're going to be more stable. You're also going to maybe stretch the adductors a little bit, which you probably need. What if you go a half kneeling? Right, then you're going to get the obliques cut into it. Then you're going to get some anti-rotation in there. There's all types of ways that you can change and alter the same movement with different grips and implements and stances. It's a really nice way to make exercise more interesting for people on any given day. The second way that I used to do it, Amber, is using a little bit of psychology, which is, I can't remember what there's a bias. There's like an official name for this. A recency bias. That's what it is. And so recency bias, if you would look it up, I don't remember the official language of it, but basically the most recent thing that you do is what you remember.
Yeah.
You don't remember anything else. And so the way to build a program for a client is to have them do whatever you want them to do for the first 45 or 50 minutes, and then give them something that they want to do for the last 10 minutes. It's the easiest hack out there. Your client, look, unless you're training like high performance athletes, even then I would still make this argument for most of them. Most people only really need 15 to 30 minutes of intense work. Really. Very few people, if they're training intensely enough, A, can withstand more than that, B, need it. And so as long as you've got 20 or 30 minutes of intense work in a workout, you still have ample time for warm-up mobility, and then you have a lot of time at the end for dumb shit stuff like tricep pull-down drop sets. That's going to allow this dude to feel his shirt stretch a little bit more on the back of his arm as he walks out with imaginary lat syndrome, feeling like he needs to go sideways to the door, even though there's a foot on each side. It's not complicated.
No, it's kind of like with budgeting, right? Like 95 is very intentional. Like 95% of your budget is very intentional, but then that 5% is like where you have fun, right? And so this is kind of similar in your programming. It's kind of 95% of it is super intentional, but then you have your little bit of time that you dedicate just for nonsense.
Just because you need nonsense.
I need nonsense in my life. I constantly do not.
Look at this podcast. I would say this podcast isn't quite 95%.
Yeah, we haven't hit that threshold yet, but we're working on it.
But if you think about it, it's not dissimilar. That's actually a really good point. There's a fair amount of nonsense in this podcast, and you would not only would it not be as interesting and exciting to listen to it. I hope you're excited to listen to it when they come out on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. But more than anything else, you probably wouldn't listen as intently. So you actually wouldn't benefit as much as you otherwise would.
Yep.
And so this is why I think things like, everybody in the fitness industry, especially online, like shits on certain things. They shouldn't like metabolic finishers. Oh, you shouldn't have the person like jumping up and down and sweating, and burpees are stupid. Nobody should ever do burpees. And it's like,
burpees.
Yeah, but like at the same time, I agree with all of your arguments on how there are better ways to train. Basically, every reason you would ever do a burpee, there's probably a better way to train. But if your client really likes feeling like they are just wiped at the end of a program, and you're not like mentally taxing them that much that they're not going to be able to function or recover, I don't think burpees are so bad.
No.
Like, wipe yourself out with some burpees, man. And it's the same thing with a finisher at the end of the workout. Is you doing set at 21s on the bicep curl or drop set triceps or whatever, like 100 crunches at the end just so your abs burn. Like, is that actually going to make you see your abs? No, it's not going to it's not going to make any difference.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to make you feel good. It's going to want to make you come back because of recency bias. And it's going to make you forget about the 20 minutes of mobility that you really needed to do so that you can sit down on the floor and play Legos with your kids until you're 75 or 80 or 85. But you really don't like doing mobility, so you don't show up to the gym to do mobility. But your trainer makes you do it. And then the same thing with the super intense 20, 25 minutes that gets you the training effect. But you don't remember any of that because you're showing up to get your triceps pumped up by the end of it. Well, if that's what makes somebody come back to training, I think it's worth it.
100%. Although I'm curious, I wonder what the data would actually show between are clients actually saying they're bored versus a coach feeling like their clients are bored. I don't know the answer to this, but
how would you ever collect data on that? But it's a good question to ask.
Because I feel like I've never had a client say, "Hey, I'm bored." I mean, and maybe they just didn't tell me to my face, which is always a possibility. But you know, I wonder about that because I feel like a lot of us are always kind of trying to show our worth, which, you know, myself included. And so that's why I do a lot of the like random crap that I do, because that's kind of feeds into that and I enjoy it, but like also it feeds into that a little bit. But yeah, I wonder,
involved, isn't there?
Huh?
There's insecurity involved.
Oh
in
yeah.
Side, isn't there?
A ton of it. But I think also in their own mind, they don't understand what they're actually selling because they have it so entrenched in their brain that what they are selling is programming, that they can't let that go. And that's why they're one of the reasons they're constantly changing it. And they see other coaches do it. So they're like, oh, I should do it too. But like, they have to understand what you're actually providing for the client. And it's not your programming.
That's a good point. It's funny because I haven't thought about that myself, probably because I don't feel emotions, but I have heard other people speak about that before, which is, I think, a very good point. Like, are you changing up your client's program because they need it or because they want it, or are you changing it up because you got bored or you're insecure? That's a challenging question.
No.
That's a challenging question. I think it's a worthwhile question to ask, to almost check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yup.
God, I miss Ren.
I know. Need his slow jams.
Yeah. So let's get into, that transitions really nicely into the next bit that I want to talk about here. The last like major bit that I want to talk about, which seems obvious, but can be forgotten, which is that coaching is customer service business. Despite prevailing wisdom, tangible results and customer satisfaction are not necessarily correlated. In fact, they're often not correlated in any real way. How happy a client is with your service has very little to do with whether or not they achieve the results they hired you to achieve. I'm going to say that again. It's a challenging point. How happy a client is with your service has very little to do with whether or not they achieve the results they hired you to achieve. Malcolm Gladwell talked about this in his book, Blink, if you've ever read the book. And there was a section where he says, people don't sue doctors that they like. And here's what led to that. I dug into a lot of the research in it. Dissatisfaction leading to litigation against surgeons was never, according to these studies, solely the result of bad medical care. Like, it's not like objectively the surgeon did a bad job. It's instead the result of assumed bad medical care because of bad client care. So here's where this all stems from. Surgeons who had never been sued spent more than 3 minutes on average longer with each patient. Surgeons that have never been sued spent longer than 3 minutes with each patient. They spent longer talking to a human. Not they got better results, right? They spent longer talking to him. They were also better listeners, and the patients described them as having more humor and having a better tone to the doctor's voice, which the researchers then continued on to say showed a genuine concern for the patient's welfare. So because of the tonality of the voice and how good the surgeon was as a listener, and the surgeon spending a bit more time with the patient assumed that the surgeon cared more about their welfare. And then finally, the surgeons who were never sued were also more likely to encourage questions and engage in active listening. Here's the most messed up part to this whole thing. There's a psychologist, Nalini Ambati, and she used a technique that she came up with, and it came to be known as thin slicing. And what she found was that she could accurately predict which surgeon got sued without hearing any words. What she did, this technique, this thin slicing technique, it removes all of the high frequency sounds so that all that was left was that sound that preserved intonation, pitch, and rhythm. So you don't know what the words are saying, but you can read the intonation, the pitch, and the rhythm. So you can tell the compassion with which the words are presented, but you don't know what the words say. If the surgeon's voice was judged to be dominant, the odds were better that they were in the sued group. If the surgeon's voice was judged to demonstrate warmth, they tended to be in the non-sued group. The judges knew nothing about the surgeon's experience. They knew nothing about the training of the surgeon. They knew nothing about the procedure that was performed, let alone anything about the success or lack of success of the procedure. They didn't even hear the words that the surgeon said to the patient. So this is what Gladwell says. He said, in the end, it comes down to a matter of respect. And the simplest way that respect is communicated is through tone of voice. And the most corrosive tone of voice that a doctor can assume is a dominant one. And coaching results and customer satisfaction are not necessarily related. Coaching is a customer service business, and secondarily, a results-oriented business.
John Berardi told a story. Actually, I think he did an interview with you a long time ago. I think you guys talked about this, where he
in Changemaker he tells this.
Where a woman joined PN, Precision Nutrition, got results, but then in a group.
This was their coaching. This was their year-long coaching. So not their professional stream. This was their
right.
client.
Yes. Yeah. From the client perspective. Yeah. As a client, she lost the weight she wanted to lose, but then in a
phenomenal result. She lost like 100 pounds.
Yeah. She did great in the program, but then in a Facebook group, I think it was, where someone was looking for feedback about the program, and she wouldn't recommend it despite her hitting her goal. But she didn't, when they asked her about it, she said that she didn't feel like her coach cared about her.
Yeah, I remember reading this in the book, and then maybe I had a conversation with him about it or not.
Yeah, because I have the book, but I haven't read it yet.
It's a dense book. It's a worthwhile book, but
I got to be in the right mindset for that. Yeah.
But I've had so many conversations with John that at this point I can hear his voice when I read the book, and he's like Obama. He speaks very slow, very measured, and very carefully and very eloquent. And so I don't know whether I was actually talking to him or whether I was reading the book and felt like
Yep. Totally have done that.
From what I remember of the story is, there was this woman who got phenomenal results as part of their year-long coaching program. And then somebody asked if anybody had experience with it in some Facebook group, and she shit-talked it. It was like, I wouldn't recommend you join it. And so I don't remember how it came about, but
He
John,
found
like,
it and he reached out to her.
he found it and he looked her up. He was like, who is this person? Like, this is the way that he says it. It probably, because I know him, probably at the time I was like, this fucking bitch, I'm gonna fucking get it. But like, in his words, he's like, oh, this is an improvement opportunity.
There's the difference between the initial thought you have and the one you say out loud, and they're often very different.
Publishing books.
Exactly.
But he was like, this is an improvement opportunity. I'm going to look up like this person's experience in the program. Like, clearly there is an opportunity where we can get better here. This person didn't have a great experience, which happens. Like, you have enough customers, not everybody's going to be happy. You can find people who are not happy with our service. Tens of thousands of customers, it's going to happen. There's no way to avoid that. Doesn't mean that you can't. It doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile to figure out what went wrong or what went wrong in their way. And you may decide that they're just wrong or they're just a human who hates the world. And that's fine. Or you might be like, oh shit, there's this gap here. And so he looked it up and he was like, this person had amazing results. Like, what the hell? And then he spoke to their coach and the coach was like, yeah, they were doing amazing. I never needed to, she never messaged. She was sending in her reports. She was doing incredible. So I never reached out. And then somebody at the team, I don't know whether it was John or somebody else, reached out to her. And that's what she said. She said she didn't feel supported. She said, yeah, I got results, but I felt like it was all me. I didn't feel like I was supported. But from her coach's standpoint, the coach was doing what the coach felt like he needed to do. She had a male coach. I don't remember who it was, but I remember it was a male coach. But the coach was doing what he felt he needed to do, which was basically leave her alone because clearly what she was doing was working. She was getting these amazing results. Meanwhile, her, this entire time, felt like she was being left out on a lurch and was not being supported. And then at a certain point, because this is a year-long program she was a part of, at a certain point she gave up trying to reach out and just kept doing what was working. Yeah, that's a good example to bring up, Amber, because that goes along with the story of Jack. It's very similar, isn't it? Where this person like did well and the coach said, you're doing well. Great. I'm not going to interfere. Meanwhile, the person was like, show me that you care. Like, even if the coach reached out and was like, yo, Wendy, you're crushing it. Anything I can do to support you? Like, anything you're unclear on? Like, know that I'm here for you. Look, I'll send you a message every week or two just to check in, but, you know, anything you need? Like, I'm checking, like, just so you know, but you're doing great. They might have had an incredible success story as opposed to somebody who is shit-talking them in groups.
And the opposite is also true as well. There's another kind of like canon, like precision nutrition story of like this person. It was also like a weight loss type client. They did the year-long program, and by the end of it, they only completed 8% of it. And so the coach was like, there's no way they're going to renew. And so like going into this renewal call, she's like freaking out because there's just no way. They only completed 8%. You know, obviously they didn't enjoy it. Like, I was there for him and, you know, we talked and all that, but like he didn't complete the work. Right. He ended up loving his experience with her and renewed. So he didn't get the results that he was looking for yet, but he loved his experience with her. And so I know from a coaching perspective, we think, okay, they didn't get the results. There's no way they're going to renew.
What was the story with that one? I never heard about that one. Do you remember? Do you know more details?
No, that was really it. They didn't work for Precision Nutrition. This particular coach just uses their year-long coaching software.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so, yeah, but it's one that you kind of hear in the groups, you know, occasionally. But
this,
you know, so just
like didn't complete anything. But the coach
just
was
8% of the, like, there's the habits, the lessons and all that. He completed total throughout the entire year, only 8% of it, but they were still in contact all year and they worked together, but he just really struggled to complete things. But he, in his mind, he did 8% more than he would have otherwise. And so he was happy with that because she cared about him. And so I just think it's interesting.
Complete on the stupid thing and they say,
right. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, totally could be. Yeah, we see that a lot.
Way that I would ever participate in any program like that.
Yeah.
I might sign up for it, but like I wouldn't even complete 8. I'd complete 2. Like I'd complete like the intro thing, and then that would be it.
Yeah, for our personalities, that would never work. But for the right person, it's great. But that's how much your customer service matters. I mean, obviously results matter as well, but you can't just rely on that.
Right. Well, this was good, Amber.
Yeah.
A little bit less.
Bring up customer service stuff. I'm good.
Yeah, a little bit less. I mean, obviously, why do you think I chose the subject? A little bit less off the walls than if it was with Ren. A little bit fewer penis jokes. I'm
sorry. I'll let my penis joke game next time.
It's like, oh, you're solo with Amber today. No penis jokes. We don't have an HR representative. We don't have an HR department. Obviously, we don't have an HR department.
No.
Anyway, hope this was useful to you, dear listener. I don't know what to call, like, friend. Like, what do you call somebody who listens to a podcast?
We should have them give us suggestions of what to call the Obvious Choice podcast listener community.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, there's another episode I want to recommend. This was episode 42. It's 8 non-obvious coaching truths. This was actually one of my favorite episodes to listen to. There was a lot of non-obvious statements about what really matters. Particularly, I really enjoyed the conversation about passive income and the fallacies around passive income in that episode. I think that's really helpful for people to consider as they think about how their career might grow. Whether you're at that point or not yet, you're still probably thinking about where this thing might go and what to do. And I think that's a really valuable one. I might have been like 5 or 6. It's like midway through, but that's episode 42. So whatever you're listening to this in, your podcast app or whatever, just scroll back, episode 42. And if you have a moment, if you're listening to this podcast, please take a screenshot, tag me at It's Coach Goodman. I'd love to talk to you. I really also just like lights me up and makes my day whenever I see any of those screenshots. So appreciate that, Amber. Thank you for doing this, and I'll talk to you soon.
That's good.
Bye-bye.
Bye.